As I think about where I am today, my childhood or my teenage years, and then early on in my businesses, nothing came easy. The struggles with changing from a physical therapist to the financial services industry was not readily accepted by family and friends, and so I had to work through that. But as I look at what I have today, in terms of the growth mindedness, like I've accomplished a lot of things that I set out to do, but it never came easy. So there's always work that had to be done. And so for me, when I think about that, some of the earliest memories I have was just being a kid and helping out doing house projects or things my parents had. One, it wasn't an option, right? It was something that my parents wanted to get done for the house and the family. And so you're part of the family and they provide a roof over your head. You got to pitch in and help out. It didn't matter if we were tired, right? Like best examples, I was a caddy for 12 years. So I would get up at 5 in the morning, go to the course at 6, caddy, come home by 1 o'clock, eat a sandwich my mom made, and then I was in the yard helping my dad do things, right, that to help their vision come to life for the family. So it's not like I could come home and just go play, right? I mean, I had to do those things as a teenager. So part of the hard work value was instilled from them. And it doesn't mean that if you didn't have that you can't develop it. What's developed over time is, the hard work is now for the things that I want for my family and friends within my reach. And so, but it wasn't ever easy. I mean, caddying was tough. I mean, early on you go and you sit there for 6 hours, you don't get out, and you go home and you make no money. Like, that's part of the deal, right? But you do it every day, you do it consistently. And so what I learned through that, it was a matter of being consistent, showing up every day, whether I wanted to or not, right? And I got to, 17, 18, 19 years old, and I'd go out on Friday or Saturday night with my friends. It didn't matter. I had to get to the course by 6 a.m. And so I had to show up whether I was exhausted or not from going out the night before. That's what I had to do because, I wanted money in my pocket to go hang out with my friends, or, and I paid for part of my high school education and then all of my college. And so education was something that was expected in the family, and so I had to find a way to pay for that. Like, my family didn't have the money to pay for all of my education. That was a struggle daily to get up and go to work even if I didn't want to. And there's elements of that throughout my career and my life. The house that I now have, I bought from my parents. It was the house I grew up in, and I've made it my own, but it wasn't handed to me. I paid market value. I did that right out of fairness to my siblings, and the opportunity was there, and I had to think about what that vision could look like for me and my daughters, right? Could we see ourselves in the house? And I had these pictures of how I could make it our own, but it didn't come out with a lot of stress, and it didn't come out with a lot of conversations with the family, right? That I was taking this house that my parents had built and keeping it in the family, but I was the one that did it. And everybody would love to see it in the family, but at the end of the day, there's some opinions around that. And it all worked out, and everybody's happy and loves it, and we got through it quickly. But there was a couple months when we were working on to make the transition happen. It was not easy. It wasn't handed to me. I had to figure it out, and that's another example. And you probably hear this all the time, so if you're struggling, right, they say that things worthwhile in life are the things worth fighting for, right? So you've got to do that stuff. If you want it that bad, you just have to figure out how. Similar to my mantra, don't tell me no, tell me how. That's just how I do it. What seemingly seems to be a setback, there's usually a silver lining in how that works out. I think too often, if you struggle with this roadblock or this negative situation, being open-minded and growth-minded allows you to see what are the potential opportunities that come out of that, and to think about how you can navigate to that path, right? Maybe this path got blocked, but you just got to find another option and be growth-minded enough and open-minded enough to see how you can get there. But at the same time, I didn't figure it out all on my own, right? I've got all these books. And so over the course of my life, I've tried everything. I've tried calendar blocking, I've tried checklists, I've tried personal trainers to get the endorphins so I've got the energy to do the work. I've tried all of these things, and I still don't know that I've got it 100% figured out. I'm clearly not, ripped, but that's still something I'm working on. But the point is, I've tried so many things over the last 2 decades that I finally got to a point where one thing kind of clicked. And there's a book that I read. So I got into reading books a little bit, not because of me, but because my daughter is a reader. She reads 30, 40 books a year, and I was never a reader until probably 2 years ago. Like, as many books as I read today, which is probably 20 or 30 a year. So it was really kind of influenced from her, because at such a young age, she just had this amazing mindset of how she wanted to live her life. She's very intentional. So part of my intentionality has been developed from my daughter, which is kind of interesting. I owe her a lot of credit for helping me change to that mindset. And so I read a book called The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. And there's things in there, the first 60 minutes of your day, 20 minutes working out, intense exercise, 20 minutes reading and journaling, and 20 minutes being intentional with like your goals, like writing them down. So there's a 60 minutes of the day that you start your day with. And what actually, and then there's the 4-hour work week, how do you get all this stuff done, being very intentional, undistracted. Like, that's still a challenge in all the things that I have. I've got a lot that comes at me every day. But what happened out of that book was the 5 a.m. habit, getting up at 5 a.m. Now I wake up like clockwork at 4:45 without an alarm, right? So it takes about 60 days or so to make that happen, or 90 days to make that happen. 30, 30, and 30, right? The first 30 is breaking down the habit. The next 30 is the painful part, right? And then the final 30 is instilling the habit. And so for me, doing that and then just reading books, and so I'll read a book, then I'll go back and I'll journal in that morning time on the book I just read while I'm starting another book. Right? So I've got this overlap of like content I've just read, but maybe not 100% absorbed, to new content I'm reading. And I've got books from, personal growth, or, Grit by Angela Duckworth, or like I've got all these books that I'm looking for something that clicks, right? Whatever their philosophies are, there might be one or two things that click, and 5 a.m. Club was the start of that. It's still kind of painful when I have late nights or long weeks, but I still do it because it's refreshing to clear my mind at 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning, read something with no real other thought of what the rest of my day will look like. Like, at the end of the day, I tried it at the end of the day, but I would fall asleep and I wasn't getting much out of it. So that was something that I failed at, right? I was like, I'll read every night before bed, right? People say to do that because then you sleep on your thoughts, and then the thoughts percolate while you're dreaming and thinking, and then it becomes reality. Like, I struggle to do that, struggle to stay awake. So for me, having quiet time, I haven't even thought about what the rest of my day looks like. I'm just thinking about the intention of the book that I'm reading, how does it apply? And it's interesting because now as I'm reading books, I'm literally in the margins writing like an example, right? Just a couple scribbles of like, oh, that sentence, like, I totally have an example of how that played out, and I didn't even know I was doing like what this book was saying you should do. That's happening now, but it didn't happen when I started reading books. When I started reading books, I thought, oh, these days are amazing. But other routines, I think for most, if you struggle, you need to find out what has the least, like what they say, like left turns, right? If you're driving down the street and a left turn here in the US, like you gotta wait for oncoming cars and oncoming traffic, but a right turn's easy, right? So I'm trying to find habits that I can form that are right turns, right? And The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy says similar things, get better by 1% a year and 367% or whatever it is. So I'm always looking for like, okay, how easy it's to incorporate a new habit that stays true to who I am. Nothing's ever been easy. It's not handed to me. I work super hard, but I don't let negative things percolate in and slow me down. I immediately flip to, okay, what are the possible positive outcomes of this? And then if I don't know myself, then I'm quickly reaching out to people. I don't wait, So that's the other thing that's come of some of this development on growth mindedness. Like, if there's something I think that would be interesting or needs to happen, or I need help solving a problem, I don't wait to make the phone call or the email or ask for help. So there's a lot of humility in growth mindedness, because I don't know everything I don't know yet. And even the things I do know might not work. For me, not being afraid, having some humility and asking for help, along with, constantly learning, it's quite frankly, I think, the only way to learn, right? That's why you go to school. You don't know what you don't know, you're being taught what you should know. And when you get into your adult life, it's a lot more of like testing and trying and asking for help. And, and I think that we were talking about people that kind of hit their peak and stagnant and don't grow, I think some of that might be is because they think they've learned everything they can learn. Or they're too proud to ask for help. I'm here to help. Like, I want to help and impact people. If I can help you with some of these comments, like having some humility, having some growth mindedness, and just not being afraid to keep going, being consistent with it, like changes your life. And in my perspective, the things that I've seen in my life and other people, it can change your life quickly, right? It's not that it's easy to change the mindset. It's super hard to change your mindset. There are beliefs that have been instilled in you for decades at times, right? You have to be able to break those and say, there might be another way to think of this. And that's what other people's opinions and thoughts and experiences help you with. Yeah, life isn't easy. It wasn't never meant to be easy. People that are wildly successful, and you hear the stories of, successful families, and you hear about the first generation crazy successful, the second generation kind of, the third generation doesn't have a clue, right? And then they go broke, and then it's the fourth generation that has to rebuild. And part of that is because by the time you get to the second and third generation, life was too easy. They didn't have the struggles. When I think back on some of the struggles I've had, and then I think of some of the struggles that even my kids had through schooling, I would tell my kids in grade school, they would have a problem on a homework assignment or test or whatever, and I'm like, well, I'm not gonna call the teacher. You've got to advocate for yourself. You've got to figure out how to talk to an adult. You got to figure out what's the problem, and then you got to work with them to figure out the solution. I'm not gonna step in and do it for you. I'm here to support. I'm here to give you ideas on how to frame it, how to ask questions. I will guide you in that regard, but I don't care if you're 12 years old or 13 years old talking to your 7th grade teacher. Like at some point I won't be there. I won't be there in college when you need to talk to your professor. I won't be there when you're 35 and you gotta talk to your boss. It's less of a issue at 12 years old, right? It's not the end of the world. It's not career ending at 12. So begin to develop the skill sets. And I think as a parent, when I look back, that's one of the things I did really, really well. I wasn't solving my kids' problems. And for that, I'm grateful. When I look back, they're successful in their own rights and they're doing the things they want to do. But I'm not going to just jump in and solve their problems because I know the answer. And I would tell them too, if they had things and they would say, Dad, I want this or I want that. And I say, okay, well, you've got 3 choices here, right? If you choose A, then the consequence is 1. And if you choose B, the consequence is 2. And if you choose C, the consequence is 3. And then I would say, I'm okay with whatever you choose. Just know that you're choosing the consequence, right? And inevitably what they did was they chose the right one, but I let them choose. But I helped them formulate the decision-making process. And so I do that to this day with myself, and you can too when you've got issues that you're coming, like, okay, this is the problem. Option A is this result, option B is this, and C is that. And if you think through what the potential results of those decisions are, then the problem becomes less of an issue. You know which path to take. And if you're then making those decisions based on the self-discovery of your values and your beliefs, it becomes very clear on which decision to take. So it's not that life's been easy for me. I'm very grateful for everything I have, and I'm pushing for more, not more physical things, but more emotional and spiritual things, if you will, right? I'm very happy about where I'm at. So I also don't want you to feel like, well, you've had these successes, like, are you unhappy? I am the opposite of unhappy. I am totally at peace with what's going on in my life. And I get those comments, like, you're always doing something, you're always pushing, like, don't you have everything you want? I'm like, I do, but I'm not who I want to be. I'm grateful for what I have, but I'm also still pushing forward. And you should too. Yeah, you should too. I just don't look at any roadblocks as like, no, they're just problems to solve, right? And if you can't solve them, someone you know, they're a phone call away, text away, email away to help you figure that out, and maybe just give you a different perspective on how you think of that. And over the years, I've developed a close circle of friends that may not think exactly how I think, but when we talk about something, we're talking about a problem, I am listening intently to how they might solve it. And then I think to myself, is that how I would solve that? Is that a good idea? What are the results of that? So, yeah, life is full of disappointments, and if you hang your hat on the disappointments, you'll live a life of regret. And I just don't have any regrets. Like, divorced, I've got 2 kids. I don't regret that. It was the right thing for the kids, although hard on them and hard on me. But at the end of the day, there's some amazing things that came out of that. So it's not a regret I have. I wouldn't go back and change it, you know. There's another good book that I read last year, and it's called The Gap and the Gain. It's somewhere on the shelf. I can't remember the author, but it literally talks about so many people, and you may be struggling with this right now. People measure themselves against the goal. They don't measure themselves against the successes. So what I mean by that, and that book is a phenomenal read, easy to read. It's a hard mental shift. So when I say I'm at peace and I'm happy, it's because I'm measuring myself in the gratitude I have about where I've come from, how far I've come, right? It doesn't take away the gain. It doesn't take away what I'm working towards today, right? But I'm not saying I'm a failure because I haven't achieved it yet. I look back and say I have achieved X, Y, Z, right? And how did I do that? What did I learn from that? So I'm measuring myself against the successes, against the gains, not against the gap, which is the goal that I have yet to achieve. And that's a totally different mindset, because then if you do the opposite, if you're measuring yourself against what you haven't achieved, you haven't hit your goals, right? And I've had business goals every single year. And if I look back at my 23-year career, maybe I've hit them 2 or 3 years out of the 23 or 24 years I've been doing it. Like, actually achieved the goal I set out to at the beginning of the year. But the reality is the business has grown exponentially every single year. And so maybe it wasn't that I didn't achieve the goal, maybe I set the goal a little too high. And that's okay, it was aspirational, right? But it moved things forward because I achieved more that year than I did the previous year. So when I look back, there's been consistent double-digit growth every single year. Maybe it wasn't the growth that I penned to paper as a goal, but when I look back at the value of the business, I'm like, holy cow, this is like more than I ever thought it would be if I had dreamed it up 20 years ago. And that's because I've pivoted along the way and learned some things. And so measuring yourself against the gain is significantly better, more positive thoughts than measuring yourself against the gap, which is the goal you haven't achieved yet. And so I keep that in perspective. So when you think about that and the humility and the gratitude you have for the things you have achieved, then I'm happy, I'm at peace. And I said this the other day to someone. We were talking about this content in particular, and I had to pause and I said, you know what? If I passed today, if I died today, I'm at peace. I've done the work. I'm proud of the work I did as a father. I'm proud of what my girls have accomplished. I'm proud of what the businesses have done. I'm proud of the team around me, proud of my friends and my family and the environment I've created. Is it what I hoped it will be? No, not yet. I'm still working on that, right? So, but I don't have any regrets. Just being at peace with it makes it so much easier to handle any challenge that comes up. You know, it's really hard, and I said this on the JMO show, it's really hard to be pissed off and grateful at the same time. Those two emotions can't coexist, in my opinion. And maybe somebody would disagree, but you know, if you think about a hard time or a stress, like you're angry or frustrated or some negative emotion, if you took 2 seconds to say, I'm grateful for you, like, you might not mean it when you say it, but give it about 10 seconds, right? And then you, like, the amount of tension just drops automatically. And so anytime there's a moment of stress or problem I have to solve, I will always, and this is something I've had to learn, is just take a minute, think about what I've accomplished so far, and then how do I solve the problem? But that's a culmination of a lot of negative experience, a lot of failures, you know, and then some successes. And I think part of learning about yourself is actually reflecting on the choices you've made. Not to beat yourself up. We all beat ourselves up, right? But I think about some poor decisions. I think about the outcomes of those. And what I found when I came up with Play Life Differently as part of that exploratory process, I found like there were some decisions a long time ago that I made where the decisions were not very genuine, and it just created more stress. You know, I would tell you, reflecting on good and bad decisions and what the results of those were, and you'll find more often than not, I believe, that if you think about the good decisions and then you think about how you made the decisions, what were you thinking of, What positive thing, what benefit, what value or belief did you make that decision on versus then those same things in the negative decision result. You'll find what your core values and beliefs are. That's a hard thing for people, is to understand what their core values and beliefs are. But I spent a lot of time thinking about that, journaling about that, reading books, writing in the margins, like, oh, that's a similar value, like a roundabout way. And that's how I get through some of the hard decisions. If that's helpful, that's what I would encourage you to do. One, find out what works best for you with time of day. What are the things, reading, journaling, whatever it is. It's not so much the tactics, but it's finding the core values and the beliefs and measuring yourself against what you have already accomplished well and what you still need to work on. But don't ever measure yourself on your failures or the things you haven't achieved yet. So I've talked a little bit about getting up early and reading and the 5 a.m. club and journaling and things like that. And that's a formula the 5 a.m. club does, right? And I've spoken to the fact that I'm not very structured, right? I don't follow routines. I have habits, right? But they're not always at the same time. They're always the same duration. And so I used to beat myself up, right? This is before I was living, the game. I was living the gap. And I would beat myself up that I couldn't stick to a schedule for working out, or I couldn't stick to a food schedule and eat the right things, or I had certain work things to do, but my day blew up and I didn't get those things done. And what I found was, journaling, writing things down for me was very helpful. So I have journals all over the house, right? And they're journals for different things. I've got a kind of a health journal. I've got a Play Life Differently journal. I've got a business journal. I've got an E9 journal. I've got all these different things. And then I've got a relationship journal. So I've got all of these journals, and I'm not writing in them every single day, right? I'm writing in them when I've got things to get off my chest or off my head, right? And here's where the writing really stemmed from. The 5 a.m. club kind of solidified it as a habit, but it was when I was going through the divorce with my kid's mom. It was very emotionally hard on me. I didn't see myself getting divorced. I never thought I would be the divorced person, right? Like, divorce wasn't a thing you do in our family, and that was really hard. I was getting those vibes from my friends and my family, right? Because that was never expected. I was supposed to be the husband and the father, and I had tried to identify myself as that because that was imposed on me. This is so embarrassing, but I accepted. I had no regrets. So I would wake up and the kids were going to a local parochial school, and I would put them in their uniforms. I'd put on the suit, I'd take them to school, and then I would go home, take off my suit, climb back into bed, set an alarm at 2 o'clock, get out of bed, put the suit back on and go pick them up. I was pretending for my kids that were 4 and 6 that dad was working, because that's what I was supposed to do. And I was ignoring the fact that I was in pain and hurting from the marriage falling apart. And so, which, by the way, I had a hand in. It takes 2 people to make a marriage work and 2 people to make it fall apart. And so I was in denial of myself partially because I was supposed to be a good husband, good father, and I had failed at that. So I wasn't accepting that was the case. I'm not taking 100% ownership, but it takes 2. We both had part in it. But I think about that, I'm like, how insane is that? That I would get up, put a suit on, take my kids to school, come home, climb into bed, put it back on to go pick them up. And then I'd put them down in front of the TV because I was just emotionally exhausted from the thought process of I'm not a good married man. Not that way, but I'm just the marriage was falling apart. I never stepped out of line or anything, but it was so devastating to who I thought I should be. And I did that for a long time. I was probably clinically depressed for 2 years or something. At some point, I was staring at my kids and they're just watching the Wiggles or whatever the heck it was, and I'm like, this is asinine. I cannot do this. And I would have some outbursts on the kids. They're just kids, but I would have a little outburst, nothing crazy, but just I'd be short with them on my answers, and I can't. This is not the dad they deserve. And so it started from that point where I was like, okay, I need to get help. I don't know what I don't know, but I'm struggling and I need to figure out how to move on because this is clearly happening. So I need to figure out a way to get past it. And so I asked around. I reached out, called some people, and a colleague of mine gave me a referral to a therapist. And so I started doing that, and I did that for like 5 years. Now, mind you, this was not health insurance paid. This was out of pocket. So I'm broke, and the one thing I'm paying for is therapy. So imagine that, right? People are like, I can't afford therapy. Like, bullshit. Like, it is the one thing I paid for. And, 20 years ago, right, at $175 an hour, 2 times a week for a period of 9 months, and then down to 1, and then down every other week. And it was thousands of dollars I did not have. I'm broke, cars being repossessed, and it's the one thing I paid for because it was that important that I be a better person to my kids. But what came out of that was this one session in particular. The therapist was trying to get me to understand my emotions, how I was feeling about things, and I had a hard time articulating my feelings. I'm a math guy, I'm logic, right? Like, I have a lot of emotions, but they're bottled up. Like, we don't talk about those. And she made the comment, I want you to get a journal, and I want you to just write how you feel. And anytime you write down, I'm sad, as an example, go grab a thesaurus. Look up the word sad and read all the words that are synonyms to sad. You'll find one that feels better than sad. Then you go to the part of the thesaurus about that word, right? And you read those synonyms. And you do it again and again until you finally find the word that captures the emotion of what you're journaling about. And that's the word you journal about. And that was an interesting exercise. It helped me understand my emotions a lot more. It then helped me get past and accept the reality of what was going on. And so I've never forgotten that moment. And then the journaling exercises where I had to keep looking in the thesaurus. And there is a psychosomatic response, she says, right, to language. So words have emotions. That's why we have such a vast vocabulary. But if you could capture the true intention of how you're feeling in a word, right, then it's almost like the resolution happens. But it won't happen until you figure out exactly, when people get in arguments, tell me what you're feeling, or a therapist says, say what you mean, say what you really feel. Like, I don't think people have the vocabulary to capture it. And so that happened, and then the 5 a.m. club and all this stuff. And so I've always written things down, and so now I have all these journals, but the reality is my journaling is much more intentional and specific. And so what happens in my journal is, the relationship one, I'm talking about my frustrations, I'm talking about the happy things, I'm talking about what that means, I'm talking about the pride of my kids or the frustrations they have. So I'm writing all that stuff down, and just putting it on paper gets it off my chest, takes the emotional, physical burden off of me psychosomatically, and allows me to have a clear head to handle what's next when I'm done journaling. Same with the vision for E9. I wrote it out. What does it mean? How are we gonna do it? What's the feel of emotionally? What does it feel like when people are there? Or the backyard, right? What does it feel like? I wanted to feel like, I wasn't sure, so I started writing it out. It's gotta feel like this, it's gotta feel Colorado-ish. And why? Because palm trees and the breeze and the fireplace and the stone, like the visual of it creates a certain emotion that I was trying to create. And so the clearer I got on the emotion I was trying to create, the clearer the vision became also. And so journaling is a good place to do that, whether you're a writer or not. I'm not a writer, and you're not either, maybe. But there is a connection to the vocabulary. It's how our brains are wired. It's how we communicate. It's how we communicate from the inside to the outside world. And so journaling is that medium. And like I said, I'm not structured, I'm not consistent. I'm not doing my relationship journal at 5 a.m. and my business journal at 6:30 and the E9 journal at 10 o'clock. I'm not doing that. I'm writing down what I'm trying to deal with in the moment. And so it could be middle of the day, I take 10 minutes. It could be first thing in the morning. It could be at night as I'm like, hey, this is a tough day. I didn't address this yet. I've got to write it down. And so journaling and writing has helped me. That's my authentic way of doing it. And so whatever it is for you, maybe you do need structure. Maybe you are a structured person. Maybe journaling at a set time every day helps you flow better. It's just one tool that I use aside from the things that we've talked about, reaching out for help with humility or, thinking about all the options to solve the problem, what are the results of those? So there's a lot of steps that go into finding how you continue to grow and evolve and change your future. My name is Marty Cappelle. I've learned to play life differently, and you can too.